Mosquito Hymn. In the heart of the French Quarter, a forgotten bloodline awakens to feed on the city's neon and rot. The heavy air of Rue Royale. A humid night in NOLA brings a strange, sweet scent and a hunger that standard food cannot satisfy. Opening. The humidity in New Orleans didn't just sit in the air, it pressed against your chest like a damp, heavy wool blanket. On Rue Royale, the gas lamps flickered with a sickly green-gold hue, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked cobblestones. Robert stood on the wrought iron balcony of their rented townhouse, nursing a glass of bourbon that had long since gone flat. His skin felt tight, a persistent itch burning just beneath his collarbone. He wasn't sweating, despite the sweltering June heat. That was the first thing he'd noticed since they arrived. His body was forgetting how to be human. Janet walked into the room, her silk robe trailing on the dusty floorboards. She looked ethereal, almost translucent, her pale skin's veins tracking a faint, pulsing violet light under the gas lamps. She didn't look at James. Instead, she stared at her own reflection in a cracked, gilded mirror. "Do you hear it?" Janet whispered, touching her throat. "The humming. It's not the cicadas, James. It's too rhythmic." Janet walked into the room, her silk robe trailing on the dusty floorboards. She looked ethereal, almost translucent, her pale skin's veins tracking a faint, pulsing violet light under the gas lamps. She didn't look at James. Instead, she stared at her own reflection in a cracked, gilded mirror. "Do you hear it?" Janet whispered, touching her throat. "The humming. It's not the cicadas, James. It's too rhythmic." From the dark corner of the parlour, Maeve, a local occult shop owner they had foolishly invited over for drinks, let out a low, brittle laugh. She was a striking woman with silver-threaded dark hair and eyes that seemed to... Bobby, the youngest of the group, was sitting on the floor, his head between his knees. He was shivering violently despite the heat. "Make it stop," he whimpered. "The streetlights, they're too loud. I can hear the electricity burning." Elena, Robert's sister, stepped out of the shadows near the kitchen. Her eyes were wide, her fingernails bitten down to the quick. She held a raw steak she had taken from the fridge, staring at it with a mixture of intense revulsion and terrifying longing. Robert stepped in from the balcony, looking at his fractured friends. The supernatural dread in the room was palpable, a thick static energy that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He looked at Maeve. "What do you mean, tasting us?" Maeve flipped over a card. It was blank, save for a dark, spreading stain that looked like dried blood. "The vampine isn't a ghost, Robert. It's a parasitic lineage, an ancient infection of the soul, and you all signed the lease to its birthplace." The physical transformation begins as the group realizes their hunger is no longer human. When the matches finally struck, the flickering light revealed a terrifying change. The darkness hadn't left the room. It seemed to have stained their very skin. Jan was still standing before the mirror, but she was no longer looking at her face. She had pulled her robe down past her shoulder, revealing deep violet veins that throbbed in sync with the distant street music. It's beautiful, Jan murmured, her voice sounding deeper, layered with an unsettling resonance. James rushed over, grabbing her arm. Jan, stop. Look at your pupils. They're entirely dilated. We need to go to a hospital. Now.
No doctors, Elena barked from the kitchen doorway. She stepped into the candlelight, and Robert gasped. Elena's teeth looked longer, sharper at the canines, and a thick, dark fluid was leaking from her gums. She wasn't.
Bobby let out a choked scream. He had pulled his hands away from his face, and his fingernails had turned a glossy beetle black, hardening into claw-like points. It hurts, Robert. My bones are shifting. Robert grabbed Maeve by her shawl, pinning her against the wallpaper. Fix this. What is happening to us? What is a vampine?
Maeve didn't flinch. Her expression was a mask of grim pity. The vampine are the apex consumers of life force, born in the shadows of the old European courts and buried deep in the Louisiana soil. They don't drink just blood, boy. They drink the essence of life, memory, emotion, vitality. You breathed in the spores from the attic. You drank the water from the old well. The transformation is already shifting your marrow.
James tried to drag Jan toward the front door, but she swatted him away with supernatural force. James flew across the room, smashing into a bookshelf, coughing up blood. James, Robert shouted, rushing to him.
Eleanor wasn't as strong as Robert. With a guttural hiss, she lunged not at James, but out the open window, dropping 2 stories down into the foggy alleyway below, disappearing into the New Orleans